Taiwan to ease mass transit mask mandate from April 17th. AI-linked company shares surge from 200% to 1,480%. US and Vietnam pledge to boost ties as Blinken visits Hanoi. Diplomats gather in Japan at historic turning point. Europe's largest nuclear reactor starts regular output. Bavaria asks for nuclear power comeback. Classic cars roar into investment funds. SpaceX approved for debut Starship flight.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on Funday News. It's Monday, April 17th, and here are your top stories. Taiwan Central Epidemic Command Center announced that it will implement general rules for eased mask requirements on public transportation starting April 17th. The CECC said that because the long holiday only brought a slight increase in cases and the curve in COVID cases appears to have flattened out, starting on Monday, the wearing of masks on public transportation such as buses, the MRT, and trains will no longer be required.
According to the center, from March 31st to April 7th, the average number of moderate and severe cases was 84 per day, while over the week since the end of the holiday, the average rose only by 2 to 86, while the average number of daily deaths rose from 15 to 17. Starting Monday, only people in medical care institutions and ambulances will be required to wear masks. It is recommended that people who have COVID symptoms, such as a cough, the elderly, and immunocompromised, wear masks.
Bloomberg reported the share price of the artificial intelligence power enterprise software company CXApp Inc. soared 94% last Friday, bringing its rally over the past 3 days to 941% on the back of a wave of retail investor interest. The company has jumped from a Tuesday close to $1.33 to ending Friday's session at $13.85 without releasing any new updates with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The stock is the latest to ride the AI wave that's boosted multiple companies this year.
Bloomberg said AI-hungry investors have propelled NVIDIA, which makes the chips needed for complex AI computing tasks, into the best-performing stock among mega-caps this year. Relatively obscure firms with AI in their names have also skyrocketed. Guardforce AI has soared more than 400%, BigBear.ai Holdings has surged more than 300%, while C3.ai has nearly doubled this year. Even after last week's searing rallies, CXApp is still a relatively small company with a market capitalization of nearly $200 million.
50 years after the last U.S. combat troops left South Vietnam, Secretary of State Antony Blinken looks Saturday to strengthen America's ties with its old foes in Hanoi as it seeks to counter China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific. Blinken and Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh pledged to boost relations to new levels as they met just 2 weeks after the 50th anniversary of the U.S. troop withdrawal that marked the end of America's direct military involvement in Vietnam.
So good to see you. How are you? Well, very good to have you.
Blinken told reporters after meetings with Chin, Vietnam's foreign minister and Communist Party chief, that the U.S. is currently finalizing the transfer to Vietnam of a third Coast Guard cutter, which will complement existing maritime security cooperation that has seen Washington give Hanoi 24 patrol boats since 2016 along with other equipment and training. All of these elements bolster Vietnamese capacity to contribute to maritime peace and stability in the South China Sea.
Top diplomats from Europe and North America were arriving Sunday in this hot spring resort town, Karuizawa, Japan, to discuss the world's most intractable crises, including ways to end Russia's war in Ukraine, confront China's aggression toward Taiwan, and lure North Korea back to nuclear disarmament talks. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi said, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been shaking the foundation of the international order, the international community is now at a historic turning point.
Security is tight in Karuizawa, but Japan has been forced to address safety concerns after a young man threw an explosive device toward Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the eve of the diplomats' arrivals. Kishida was uninjured Saturday and continued campaigning. The 3-day talks will also see the first real test of the Biden administration's assertion that there has been minimal damage from the disclosure of highly classified documents related to the war in Ukraine and U.S. views of its allies and partners.
I always needed that time on my own. I never thought I'd be here.
I take your blessings with your heartaches too. It's so easy and so wonderful to know it's you.
学习，一切从今天开始。Funday 英语。
Finland's much-delayed Olkiluoto 3 nuclear reactor, Europe's largest, began regular output early on Sunday. OL3's operator, Voima TVO, which is owned by Finnish utility Fortum and a consortium of energy and industrial companies, has said the unit is expected to meet around 14% of Finland's electricity demand, reducing the need for imports from Sweden and Norway. OL3's startup comes as Germany switched off its last 3 remaining reactors last Saturday, while Sweden, France, Britain, and others plan new developments.
The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is the largest in Europe and provides more than 20% of Ukraine's electricity.
TVO said Sunday, after completing the transition from testing to regular output, the new reactor is expected to produce for at least 60 years. Construction of the 1.6 gigawatt reactor, Finland's first new nuclear plant in more than 4 decades and Europe's first in 16 years, began in 2005. OL3 first supplied test production to Finland's national power grid in March last year and was expected at the time to begin regular output 4 months later, but instead suffered a string of breakdowns and outages that took months to fix.
The German state premier Markus Söder was quoted saying that Bavaria wants to continue operating nuclear power plants under the state's jurisdiction. The move brought a possible comeback for the type of energy Germany finished phasing out on Saturday. Söder said the state, home to many of Germany's most successful exporting manufacturers, wants the federal government to change the nuclear exit law to allow the operation of such nuclear power stations under the state's own jurisdiction.
While the world is still reeling from an energy crisis, Germany decided to take its 3 remaining nuclear power plants off the grid.
The Prime Minister of the state was quoted by Bild am Sonntag newspaper as saying, "Until the crisis is over, and the transition to renewables succeeds, we must use every form of energy by the end of the decade." Bavaria also wants to be a pioneer in nuclear fusion research and to construct its own research reactor. Germany pulled the plug on its last 3 nuclear power stations on Saturday, including Bavaria's ISAR 2, ending a 6-decade program as Berlin enacts its plan for fully renewable electricity generation by 2035.
According to Knight Frank's 2023 Wealth Report, vintage cars have risen 185% in value over the past decade, outstripping the growth of luxury rivals wine, watches, and art, and ranking second only to rare whiskeys. Last year, a 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe that raised to 135 million euros. These kinds of mega deals are at the vanguard of billions of dollars of annual spending on classic cars globally in a wave of investment in this alternative asset.
You might not think of a car as an investment. After all, depreciation is a car owner's biggest cost after fuel.
CEO and global head of asset management at Italy's Azimut, Giorgio Metta, said, "The track record of the past 30 years tells us classic cars have become a financial asset class we want our clients to have in their portfolios." This year, the asset manager is launching a fund to invest in vintage vehicles, and says it'll only bet on cars worth more than 1 million euros each. Small Swiss asset manager Hedeka Capital launched a 50 million euro, closed-end, fund targeting returns of 9% to 15% after 7 years.
On Friday, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, granted a long-awaited license, allowing Elon Musk's SpaceX to launch its Starship rocket to orbit for the first time. The company affirmed the launch from its Twitter account. On Monday, April 17th, the rocket is expected to depart from SpaceX's Starbase facilities in Texas. Regulatory notices filed earlier on Friday indicate liftoff could occur anytime from 5:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. CT. The U.S. FAA said the license is valid for 5 years.
A fully reusable, super heavy lift launch vehicle that's meant to return the first astronauts to the moon's surface,
the FAA said, After a comprehensive license evaluation process, the FAA determined SpaceX met all safety, environmental, policy, payload, airspace integration, and financial responsibility requirements. SpaceX's Starship spacecraft and Super Heavy rocket, collectively referred to as Starship, represent a fully reusable transportation system designed to carry both crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Starship will be capable of carrying up to 150 metric tons fully reusable and 250 metric tons of expendable payload.
Let's take a look at today's vocabulary from the news of the ease of mask mandate. Number 1, implement, 是实施生效贯彻执行. The government promised to implement a new system to control financial loans institutions. Number 2, flatten out, 停止生长，不再升高，停止上升. Export growth has started to flatten out. Number 3, compromise. 有指因为行为不很明智，使陷入危险，使受到怀疑. She had already compromised herself by accepting his invitation. And that's all for today's news. Turn into Funday news from Monday to Friday and click the link below to join Funday for free. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I will see you next time.